Well, that's autumn for you, and you noticed in that little film there was a mention of fungi, and to me, I don't think you can really experience autumn without experiencing the joys of fungi, and luckily I have with me a special guest, Jennie Keighley, who's a researcher and a mycologist, someone who studies fungi. Jennie, first of all, welcome. I'm so pleased you've come, because fungi are one of my... I think fungi have a bad time of it generally, don't they? The reputation is not good. So, first of all, let's talk about fungi. Fungi they're not plants and they're not animals.
They're not. We used to categorise them with the plants when we knew a little less about biology. But what we know nowadays, that we have a plant kingdom and we have an animal kingdom, and there's also the kingdom fungi, which is a really diverse group, many, many species. We've not even discovered a fraction of them really yet. That could be as many as 1.5 million species.
1.5 million?
Of which we've only discovered about 10% so far. So there's a lot of work to do for, hopefully, generations of mycologists to come.
Well, I suppose every day we're in contact with fungi, whether it's mushrooms that we cook or it might be even the athlete's foot or yeast, which is used for brewing. So they've just got so many roles and they're so diverse.
Absolutely. People don't seem to realise exactly how important they are to us in our everyday lives. Medicines, penicillin, such an important antibiotic, was developed from a fungus. Let's say things like corn that we eat.
Corn, yeah.
Obviously beer and wine are made using fungi. They're everywhere.
Well, this time of year, you obviously notice them because they come up in autumn and they rot things. And
they do.
That's always, sometimes seen as a bad thing. Well, they're associated with rot and decay. But it's got to be a good thing.
Absolutely. If they weren't there, we'd all be up to the eyeballs in dead plant matter. So someone's got to do that job of breaking things down, and they will decay things and make the nutrients in them available for the next flush of plants.
Well, you brought in some fungi. One of the ones, before we start, actually, one of your friends actually brought in a special fungus for us.
Yes, he did.
And it's one of the biggest toadstool type. This is a typical form of fungi that we expect. I'm just going to reach down and pick this up very carefully. Oh, very, very carefully. So look at the size of this thing.
It's huge.
Absolutely enormous.
So this is a parasol.
And you can see why it's called a parasol.
Absolutely, yeah. This was collected
huge
today by my good friend Pete.
And if we look at the top of this parasol, it's got dark scales over it.
It has, and they're just sort of gradually flaking off. Yeah. So this one's about at the end of its life now, really.
Now, this is what a lot of people would think of as being at least it's very big, but a typical toadstool or mushroom.
Yeah.
What we're seeing, though, here is it's not really the whole of the creature, is it?
No, not at all. This is just a small fraction of the actual individual fungus. So this is just the reproductive structure that's sent up, sometimes once a year, sometimes several times a year, and this is the reproductive organ, if you will, a bit like plants have flowers. And most of the fungus exists as this mat of fibres, which we call the mycelium, and that's in the soil. So that's everywhere in the soil.
So if I scrape, you scrape back leaflets, you see what looks like tiny cotton
little
threads.
White fibres,
yes.
yeah.
That's really the fungus.
Mushroom,
that's the sort of engine house.
And that's permanent all year long. And then, say, once a year, often in autumn, they'll start sending up their mushrooms to reproduce.
This is just amazing. This is a big parasol by any standard. I've eaten these.
Yeah, they're quite tasty.
They're really tasty. They've got a nutty sort of taste.
They have, yeah. My friend Claire and I had them with omelettes the other day.
And then if we look at the underside of this, there's actually rows and rows and rows of gills. And those are for what?
So the spores gather on the gills, and then as the mushroom opens out and matures, the spores will drop. And the spores are a bit like a plant's seeds, so they're for reproduction, and they will drop to the ground, and that's how they reproduce.
And your field mushroom, sort of the ones that we eat, works on the same sort of principle as this, doesn't it? But that grows in field. Well, that's the parasol, and that's a really mighty specimen.
Yeah,
fantastic.
That's a great one.
But talking of spores, let's put that down carefully. Okay, talking of spores, you've got some other fungi there which produce vast numbers of spores.
So as I say, fungi are really diverse, and you don't just get the mushroom-shaped ones. Puffballs are also quite common. So this is a puffball.
That's a puffball, and this is it feels leathery.
Yeah.
It's like a
quite
little
squidgy.
leather bag, and it's squidgy, and it's full of spores, isn't it?
It is, and this is essentially the before and the after, because this is the same thing.
Yeah.
Let me see that there. So that would have looked like this one, and then the spores start to mature inside, and eventually the edge will start to break away. The spores will disperse. Sometimes you'll see clouds of spores coming out from puffballs, particularly if something like a raindrop splashes on it, and they're full of billions and billions of spores. And then this is what you're left with at the end, and that will gradually break down and return into the soil.
It's extraordinary, really. I mean, it almost doesn't look like a living thing. It feels, I don't know, inanimate. Very, very, very strange. And of course, giant puffballs are very spectacular.
Yeah, and they can get to the size of a football. Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. So that's a puffball. You've also got some other fungi, just to show the variety. These little ones here.
There's a few bits and bobs. We've got this is candle snuff fungus.
So this is the little fungus, and it looks like a wick of a. See that, can we? Yeah, it looks like the wick of a candle has been snuffed out, and it's white at the top.
That's
and this grows on dead wood.
It does. So that's breaking down that wood. As we were saying, the nature's recyclers. It will gradually get to work and convert that dead wood to available nutrients for other plants.
And candle snuff is. You see it almost everywhere, don't you, throughout the winter?
Yeah, really common.
Yeah, that's great, actually. So that's one that you can look out for. The one thing that puts me off fungi sometimes is the sheer numbers of them, and the fact that many of them look quite similar. And, how do I tell one from another?
It can be very difficult.
Have you got any tips for distinguishing them?
I would say avoid the little brown ones, because there's lots of little brown ones that all look really similar. But yeah, sort of the really easier things to look out for are things like brackets.
Have you got a bracket?
Yeah. So this is a really common one. This is birch polypore, so you'll see that growing on birch trees. Underneath these tiny little pores, and that's where the spores drop out of. So yeah, I would say if you're looking for mushrooms, make sure you look down at the floor and up at the trees, because you get these sort of brackets growing.
Well, this is the one that used to be called the razor strop fungus.
That's
I think,
right.
The old cutthroat, Sweeney Todd type cutthroat razors.
Yeah.
It was used, wasn't it, just to hone the edges of them when it dries out.
To polish things off.
But they're quite tough, these things, and they do kill birch. These actually do kill birch trees, I think.
They do, yeah.
But not all fungi are harmful to trees as well, and we should say with brackets, I suppose they are. They contribute towards the decay, but of course with the decay of some trees you get all the insects move in, so actually they're a good thing.
It's part of the natural cycle, isn't it? Everything dies, and so this is basically feeding on the tree, and then invertebrates, as you say, will move in and also make use of it. They make crevices for bats to live in.
Yeah, that's great. That's a bracket. There's an absolutely cracking fungus here, but it's completely unexpected. You're going to have to lean down and pick this one up because it's huge.
Yeah, so a lot of people will have seen this around and not realised it's a fungus, I would say, because this green coloration that we see, it looks a bit like the wood stained, but that's actually another fungus growing in there and decaying the wood and breaking it down.
Yeah, I don't know I know the Latin name of this. It's something like chlorosplenium.
That's right, yeah. We did have some fruiting bodies on it somewhere.
Oh, did you? So what we're seeing here is not the fruiting bodies at all. This is the mycelium.
So this is the mycelium.
Little threads running through it.
Yeah, so this is living on the log there. And then eventually you'll get little fruiting bodies, which are the mini mushrooms on this one.
This was once cultivated for Tunbridge ware. Did you know?
No, I didn't know.
Well, back in the days when marquetry was popular and inlays were popular in furniture in Georgian times, 18th century, 19th century, this was grown and it was cultivated. A veneer was taken of this green fungus for the colour and used as inlays in delicate patterns in wood, and it was known as Tunbridge ware, and it still sells nowadays. So this fungus actually achieved immortality in some of our finest furniture.
Wow,
it's great, isn't it? Well, thank you for bringing. Actually, it's one of the best examples of that I've ever seen.
I thought it was a nice one.
It was great. So we had a quick tour of the fungal world there.
Yeah.
What I like about fungi is we're learning more and more about them all the time, and especially their associations with other plants.
Yeah, this is a really sort of up-and-coming field at the moment, because we're realising how interconnected fungi and plants are. We now know about 90% of plants on Earth have these associations with fungi, and in many cases that association is essential for them to get nutrients from each other. So the roots of the plants will join under the ground with the roots of the fungi, with the fungal mycelium, and form these connections that are called mycorrhizae. And basically this mutualism between the two, they exchange nutrients, and the plant gets improved access to water because the essential roots of the fungus are a lot finer, so they can get into all the little nooks and crannies in the soil.
So far from being, we say the enemies of trees and rotting of trees, they're actually helping trees grow.
Completely essential, yeah. We wouldn't have trees as we know them without fungi. In fact, plants wouldn't have colonised land without fungi. The ancient relatives back in the primordial oceans, a little marine algae and a marine fungi joined together and started helping each other to acquire nutrients, and that led to plants being able to colonise land. So that wouldn't have happened without fungi.
Oh, that's brilliant. Actually, while I've been talking, we've had a tweet come in. Where have we got it?
Wow.
What have we got? What did it say? Springwatch photograph this fungi. Do you know what that is?
I've seen it, but I can't remember the name, unfortunately.
Is this one of the brackets? I think this is.
It's bleeding something or other.
Yes, this is one of the brackets, and they do bleed this particular very viscous sort of liquid.
Yeah.
There's one called the blushing bracket. Sorry, not the blushing bracket. There's a hairy bracket fungus called Inonotus, which actually bleeds these droplets, and they ooze from it.
Yeah.
And there are weeping brackets as well. I'm not sure. I mean, for a photograph, that's the trouble with a lot of fungi. As we were saying, they're so difficult to identify.
Yeah, especially from a photo.
But there are weeping brackets, and Inonotus hispidus is called the hairy bracket, and that sometimes does this as well. And that grows on ash trees mainly. But it's just getting to grips with the amount of fungi out there. How would you recommend people get started?
There's some great books out there, I use Roger Phillips's mushroom book, and just get out there and look, see what you can see, and then you start getting to grips with the main characteristics, and you also start to realise how diverse they are. So once you can sort of pick out these very distinctive ones, of which there's quite a lot, you start learning the names and get more and more interested, like I did.
Well, the names are fantastic. They've got some amazing common names as well as puffball. There's a wolf dung, isn't there? One of the puffballs is called wolf dung.
Is it? I've not heard
It's not really
one.
Wolf dung. And what I like about and there's ergot, things like ergot, which little tiny fungus grows on rye and grasses. It actually was responsible for
making people very ill. Yeah,
very serious. Well, I suppose we've got to deal with the issue of fungi having a bad reputation because you need to take care over which ones you eat.
You do.
And there are no hard and fast rules, really, are there?
No, I mean, there's only a handful out of all these fungi. There's only a handful that would actually do a lot of damage. But obviously, you've got to know what something is if you're going to eat it. So just be so careful, or speak to someone that does know. Because there are things out there that can kill you, as we know.
Well, there are. And so, in any doubt, that's the rule. Just don't get involved. But you. What about picking fungi as well? I know there's a bit of controversy about that. Picking in moderation?
Of course, yeah. I'd encourage people to go out and look for things, and if you're completely happy, for example, with the parasol we saw there, if you want to take that home and eat it, I think that's great, as long as you're sure what it is, and you're not going to start harvesting things for a commercial basis, because, that will have a knock-on effect on the population.
But I think fungi are just something to revel in. What's it been like this season? My feeling is that it hasn't been quite as good in the Midlands where I am as maybe some years have been.
It seems to have varied, because I've heard great reports from elsewhere, and certainly we had a really sort of dry, hot summer, and then as soon as we got a flush of rain, I found some of the species that I work with were popping up all over the place. So I think for some things it's been a good year, and maybe for others it hasn't. But everything's got its own sort of niche. different environmental variables will affect different species.
And we're just learning, I suppose, on a little bit more about fungi, about how valuable they are as indicators. There's a lot to learn of good quality habitat.
Yeah.
And things like the candle snuff you were showing me earlier, and the birch polypore we had a look at, and even that chlorospinium. These are about all through the winter as well, so it's not just in autumn.
That's it. Now's the main time to get out and see mushrooms, but there's things visible all year round. Certainly the birch polypore, things like oyster mushrooms. Yeah, so get out there looking all year round.
That's good advice. Jenny, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for bringing in some absolutely cracking examples of fungi.
Thank you.
You fired me up. I'm going to go out looking this up tomorrow.
Good.
It didn't take much persuasion, so thank you.
Thanks,
we're going
Brett.
to go to a camera now. Is it one of the night cameras? Have we got a live camera? I don't know what's happening here.